2025, the global advertising and marketing industry saw an AI shift that ingrained itself in the inner industry processes. The industry also generated between 1.14 trillion and 1.19 trillion in ad spend. Today, we take a look at the marketing and advertising industry highlights of the past year and, of course, cast our expectations for the year ahead. Good day and welcome to the first episode of Marketing Media Money on CNBC Africa in 2026. Your front row seat to the marketers, brands and strategies shaping the future of marketing and advertising in Africa. My name is Kiamo Mosipile. Now, to help me dissect this further, I'm joined in studio by my guests, Masego Motsogi, the MD of MNC Saatchi Abel, and Mungezi Mtati, Senior Brand Strategist at Roger Wilco Digital Marketing Agency. First off, Masego, welcome back, and of course a warm welcome to you, Mungezi, as we usher in the first episode of 2026. Now, the year in review, 2025, lots of big shifts happened, but I guess I'd like to begin with what defined marketing for you in 2025. I'd like to begin with you, Masego.
Thank you, Gamma. Thank you for having me. Geez, 2025, an interesting year it was. Yeah, it's, obviously you speak about AI, that's been a big driver. I don't think anyone can ignore the fact that this thing is here, it's here to stay with us. But I think for me, what's been interesting is the fact that consumers are getting clever with it as well. They're understanding it. And so we can't take it for granted. When you look at the number of adverts that have been cancelled because they have deployed full AI to actually build them, but the people are actually reacting, And I think it's been an ongoing conversation to say, is AI here to take away the creativity, or is it a catalyst to creativity? So for me, that's been one of the biggest things, especially because every client wants to hear what you're doing with AI over and above the creativity, the policy around it. How does it affect markets? How does it affect, the policy within their own institutions? And, because things can fall apart very quickly with that. So AI has been a big one for me. Automation, we have to make things at the speed of light almost. Go to market, there's a lot of competition in market. And so if you're working for Bank X and Bank Q wants to go to market, you absolutely have to make sure that you are in market as quickly as possible. So automation has been another one for me that's been a big one. I'd say as well collaboration. I think in a world where we find that consumers are exposed to so much, brands are, iterative, there's so many of them as well. And so when we think about attention and how little attention people actually have in these days, it becomes important for brands to actually live together in an ecosystem that's not just, a brand that operates on its own and thinks that the consumer doesn't links with it alone. And so I've seen interesting brands collaborate, and not just inwardly. I think, previously thinking of a car brand would have had an interesting brand within the system in the car. But now brands are out there, they're talking about it, they're realizing that consumers are, just not linear people. They have a full, life or lifestyle, if I can call it that they need to tap into at different points with each other. I could go on. Yeah. I've got so many more. But I think
Mungezi Masego gave quite a mouthful in terms of what stood out for her, and especially touching on obviously the obvious buzzwords, AI, but more the interchangeable and changing dynamic between brand and consumer. So I guess I'd like to ask, from your perspective, what were the highlights of marketing and advertising in 2025? And maybe also the lowlights.
Yeah. So I think in agreement with Masego, one of the biggest highlights for me has been collaboration, and not just brand collaboration, but collaboration among agencies and brands globally. So African talent making it on the global stage. So we saw awards at Cannes, for instance, where a South African agency won an award for KFC Thailand, right? So these sort of collaborations were really on the rise in 2025. We also saw collaborations with local agencies on global brands, doing work globally, winning awards on global stages. So I think that has become one of the defining points. And another one, which is debated quite a lot in the industry at the moment, is this idea of purpose-driven work, right? Where a lot of awards that submitted in these awards shows are purpose-driven work. In fact, I was talking to Masego a moment ago about their purpose-driven work, which has been cleaning up at awards as well, right? So the criticism is that a lot of the time purpose-driven work is because people or an agency want to solve a community or problem in society or whatever the case is, but it's not really a brand problem. They see an opportunity, a problem, a challenge, and they leverage some of their brand work, some of their brand thinking to solve this problem. And when you think of the problems that Africa and the challenges that Africa is facing, we have a lot more challenges here than other parts of the world. As a result, we should be doing a lot more purpose-driven work, right? And I take on that criticism, but also I take on the fact that because there's so much purpose to be served here, brands here act differently than the same global brand anywhere else in the world. So there's that as a bit of a highlight. On the lowlights, marketing and advertising are constantly under fire for short-termism, short-term work, and doing work that doesn't build brand. That has been one of those lowlights. That said, we saw at one of the awards, I think the Effies, where one of the brands was celebrated for doing a campaign over a period of 8 years. So there's the short term, but we're also seeing a lot of this long-term brand building work that's coming out of South Africa, coming out of Africa as well. There's another piece of work as well that came out of Kenya, which cleaned up at the Louis in South Africa. So there have been a lot of these things, but in short, I think we are starting to see that Africa is really defining its voice and its place in the world. And as Africans, we are celebrating work and purpose on the continent that really makes a change to people here.
Yeah, I'd really like to stay on your point that you made about the kind of lowlights being building sustained brand equity and an almost instantaneous approach to campaigns and other strategies. So I'd also like to ask, with the shifts that happened in terms of first-party data, a more conscious consumer, and an environment where attention is, being fought for by the second, would we say that marketing has gotten better in measuring effectiveness in 2025?
We have. So I think with a bit of a caveat, because while we have become really better at measuring consumer behavior, measuring wins as marketing, there's also the side of we are still short-term in our thinking, right? So while we're better on the one side, there's also the other side that we're focusing on, and I think it's a lot to do with economic constraints for everyone, both brands and the consumer. We are becoming better, but the consumer is changing. The consumer has changed. Masego mentioned AI, right? So we are realizing that, which is another point that I kind of want to, I suppose, pick up on, which is that consumers are no longer Googling things. Consumers are now using AI, right? Yeah. So there's the change in terms of people criticizing brands for using AI for ads, but there's also the other change of brands not being ready for generative engine optimization, where a consumer will ask an AI, which pair of jeans should I buy at this price for this quality, right? And the AI will say, buy that pair. But actually the pair that you usually buy, which is the more established one, just isn't ready for AI. So we are understanding the consumer in very many ways, but understanding also that the consumer is changing.
Sure. There's also, I guess, a center of contention and debate, and it's not just here in the marketing industry, but the role at which the relationship between human impact and human creativity is evolving alongside generative AI. And some would argue that the future of intellectual property is going to see AI taking the forefront. So in this environment, what are the guardrails and what should be prioritized most because of how fast-paced things are happening?
Look, I mean, it does get us nervous that there is that notion, and when you deal with AI and you actually input information into AI, you realize that you get back so much, right? But I like what Mongezi is saying about, we are defining our brands as Africa. There's always nuance that I don't believe AI will actually get to. And so yeah, there is a challenge, there is a balance, there's a lot of learning that we have to do around AI, I think still, and I think it'll continue happening. But the reality is that, creativity comes from the soul, when you are a girl from Zimhlope and you've got certain things that matter to you, I'm not sure how AI can actually help us get to the true nuance. So I think, latching onto the last question you were asking around measurement, and there's been a progression over the years where, I've heard, people say marketing does not have a seat at the table. And that's essentially because our work previously has not been measurable to a deep extent, right? But just as that is the case, you realize that this data-driven work is not necessarily something that speaks to the hearts of humans. And at the end of it all, we are talking to humans. We are talking to people with souls, with humanity. And so I think what the challenge for us is going to have to be, how do we balance all these things, data and human nature? How do we balance AI with creativity? So I don't have a definitive answer for you, Kiamo, but it's a learning for us. But also, Mongezi speaks about certain shows that we've seen. What I'm enjoying a lot is that when you have people judging these shows, the push around AI, specifically around creativity, is that may the ad not be made by AI, in its fullness. Where's the creative idea? How did AI walk alongside yourself instead of AI? I mean, one of my campaigns has been one of those that have been critiqued to say, did you use AI as the generator of the idea, or has it been a tool that you've used around the idea that you've built? So you are starting to see that we are building our own guardrails, and hopefully it's something that sustains, because there's beauty in creativity, there's beauty in how we think as humans. AI is created by humans, though, so we'll see how things go. Yeah.
And I guess it's a side-by-side approach as AI continues to infiltrate so many aspects of the daily operations. Then policy, then leadership structures need to also evolve to match those needs. So now we cast our eyes, of course, here to 2026, drawing the lessons from the previous year. What do you think marketing will demand, and what will define marketing in 2026?
I think just to, as opposed to go back to this AI point and hopefully close it. So a lot of things happened around AI. So in 2022, there was the novelty of AI. 2023, still there. 2024, we started seeing a lot of brands and agencies kind of asking what it really does. Is it a toy? Is it a series of nice toys to have? Is it things that, to Masiko's point, help us understand humans, or whatever the case is? I think 2026 will really be a lot about AI ethics. How ethical is all of this? You spoke, I think there was the talk of intellectual property. Where does that intellectual property belong? Does it belong to the AI? Does it belong to the people, to the person who generated the prompts for that particular piece of work? So I think this space of AI ethics will become even bigger, especially on a continent where we are trying to generate more jobs. We are trying to create more opportunities. We are not as represented on AI as other parts of the world. A couple of months ago, I spoke to a doctor who works within the space of AI quite a lot. And I think one of the things she says is one of the opportunities for Africans in this AI space is there aren't people who look like you and me quite a lot there. So if you could capture as many videos, capture as many pictures, send them to the AI platforms as much as possible, you get paid for it, you get opportunities. That said, when creating this kind of work, when Masiko would have created a piece of work, now it appears in AI, and I get an idea out of it as a different creative from a different space, where does that belong? And what are the ethics in AI? And I think that's one of the things. The other thing that has been quite a talking point in 2025 around AI is that, at least in the awards that I've been in, and maybe Masiko can also tell us about the ones that she's judged, I'm starting to see that the novelty of AI is wearing off. we're starting to get this sense of what we got in 2008, 2009 on social media, when in 2007, everything was about social media and digital. But by 2009, social media was being seen as a platform. Today, you don't talk about social media for social media's sake. You talk about it as a platform, as an enabler. So in 2026, I feel like AI will be spoken about as a platform and an enabler. There won't be, this year in some award shows, there was an AI category. I feel like that AI category will fall away, and it'll be like, AI is like using a PC. It's not a thing to talk about. It's like talking on the phone. It's not a thing we talk about. We talk about what it enables. That's definitely going to be one of the issues that I think.
Actually, so I find that quite surprising. So in essence, the kind of shine and the disruptor that AI has been defined as is in essence losing its pace in 2026.
Yeah, in my view, yes.
And I just also want to turn my attention or our attention towards some of the trends we can expect. I know there's research around how SEO is evolving. Does it even really matter in 2026? And as well, if we compare ourselves globally versus in Africa, there are inroads that have been made in terms of CTV and how media channels are converging and not almost just these single channels. So from your expertise, Masego, what is the defining trends for marketing in 2026?
You speak about media. Media, I think, again, talking to the consumer, that I leave here and go somewhere through a certain route, and my experience of a brand can't just be how I found it in a studio, for instance. If I'm going to walk the streets, it better speak to me in that environment. And I think that's what we're learning and seeing. It's no longer what we call in our industry matching luggage. You have to tailor your message to, every media point. And I suppose that's why automation becomes such a big thing, right? Because you can't necessarily create from scratch unless you're super into your craft, which is important as well in the world that we live in. So I do think that omni-channel presence in a unique and tailored way is an important thing. And then I think for me, what I've noted, and I mean, we've seen it in 2025, we've seen it in 2024, ownable moments. Most recent is Spotify and the rap, right? And how they've actually taken that moment, owned it, but also it's so deeply entrenched in what they do as a brand. Would be one of the things that I think we're going to see more of, because yes, we're living in this world that's data-driven, that's AI-driven, that's automated, but we need, as I said, remembering that we are speaking to humans, that remains at the core. We're not necessarily dealing with robots, and therefore, how do you own a moment that speaks to the insight, to the human insight? I think that's what I see happening going forward. That's a big one. And then, we speak about collaborations. I think we're going to see more of that. We've seen a lot of it happen in the fashion industry as well, where they have a creative director come in to, design or work with designers to bring out a certain aesthetic. But it's not just that world. As Moise says, I see brands collaborating, I see humans collaborating. We find ourselves in industries where, you have to deal with people in Nigeria, but what applies to Nigeria can't necessarily apply to South Africa, and so forth, and so on. And so it's really making impactful moments by having unique, ownable, specific moments within your brand for your consumer. That's what.
And just continuing on, what would you say is a marketing habit that must die in 2026, and what must replace it?
I think what must definitely die is seeing consumers through one lens, through that particular lens, and what must grow is seeing consumers holistically. So I think to go back to the point that Masego made about, I suppose, how we view consumers and how brands should speak to consumers on the street, one of the reports that came out this year in South Africa is the South African CX report, where they look at how people interact with brands and what their customer experience is. And one of the things that came out this year quite strongly is this idea that while people might be savvy digital shoppers who drive the brand sort of trends for brands, they're also people who go offline and want to shop in stores. So a lot of the time, what has happened in some instances, in fewer instances, especially across the continent, one brand will really over-index on how much they improve their digital e-commerce experience, and then and then there's an e-hailing platform that's really famous for this, and then not be contactable when you have a problem, right? Because when there's a problem, people want to speak to people. And in some instances, so take fashion for instance, if you buy on an e-commerce site in fashion and you are a super shopper, as the report finds them, you also want an in-store experience that matches what you get online. A lot of the time, brands tend to not match these two experiences, and in the worst instances, when there's a problem, you can't talk to a human. You have to talk to a bot. You have to send an email and get a response in 7 working days, which is not the case if you are in a store. So I think one of the trends that we'll start seeing is that both these should start getting stronger. If not, the consumer will leave. They will shift. And I think one of the things that I saw yesterday was that there's this thing where, I mean, Amazon is in South Africa now. Walmart is in South Africa. A lot of people have only experienced those brands online. They've only experienced those brands not in South Africa but overseas, and now they're coming here. And there's an expectation as to how much that online experience, how much these drops, as they are called online, match what I see in store. If I see rows and rows and rows of shelves that look like any other retail store, it diminishes that experience, that expectation that I had. So I think these are things that we'll start seeing. You spoke about SEO a bit, if I may touch on that. So I think one of the big things that is coming out in this space is this GEO, Generative Engine Optimization. And so in this space, brands that are not really fit for and built for generative engine optimization are losing out on customers. So I think we'll start seeing a growth in that space as well, as more and more people ask AI where they should be looking for things. So brands that aren't prepared for that are going to lose out on customers. And then, of course, there's this space of collaboration. Africans collaborating with Africans collaborating with creatives from other parts of the world, brands from other parts of the world, because increasingly the world is realizing that original ideas are coming out of Africa, especially for purpose, especially for solving human challenges that brands can serve. They're coming out of here as well.
And Masego, as we are nearing the end of our time, how should marketers look at attention in 2026?
So that's something that's top of mind for us as the MNC Saatchi Group. We've been working with Dr. Karen Nelson-Field. You know, when you understand that the attention span of a human is shorter than that of a goldfish, sitting at about 2.6 seconds, it's a real problem, right? Where consumers have very little time for us, but and not because they don't have it. There's so many brands, there's so many media touch points, and so I think what one needs to do is really interrogate your brand and how it shows up in society. You know, we speak about brandable assets. What do those look like? You know, and it can't just be on a billboard. It can't be on a print ad. It's actually the feeling it gives to people as well. Coming also from a branding and design background, it's something that is so deep in my mind about how do I make sure that people, and I mean, I speak about but there's a team of 300 people behind me, that we make sure that the minute is a long time, as I say, but you know, the first 2 seconds into whatever you put out there is well understood. People understand that it is your brand. They have an understanding of a message already. And also, you know, I think while we are trying to make sure that the TV ad speaks, it gets the attention, I think attention will also be brought through brand experiences. It's a big thing. Again, in this world that is so technologically driven, we are speaking to humans. So what brand experience are you bringing to them? You know, e-commerce versus the store. What does that look like? How do we bridge the gap to make sure that we actually do graduate that moment of attention? And so it builds on loyalty. Am I speaking to the person at the right time, in the right tone, and how does that link back to our brand assets? You know, and so that's a big thing for me. Attention will be resolved by us being focused. And also, you know, as we talk about 2026 and what the trends are, it feels more and more, you know, as Mongezi speaks, as I speak, it does feel like it's going back to the human consumer. It's really the year of the consumer, understanding how they feel, what they feel, how do you feed them. You're going to have a TikTok strategy, but your people, half the people are out on the streets. What does that look like? How do you mirror what you're doing on a specific platform and in real life?
Yeah.
And so attention is not just one. Exactly. Yeah. But we're going to have to work hard on it.
Yeah, I think what resonates with me in terms of how you say the human experience should be top of mind is people often remember not what you said, but how you made them feel.
Exactly.
And I think, in light of what you've both mentioned, if brands and agency can really focus on giving that long-lasting impact and building and sustaining those relationships with consumers, then they're definitely out of the water. But unfortunately, we could go on on what to anticipate for the rest of the year. That's unfortunately all we have time for. But of course, there are plenty more discussions in store for you. I'd like to thank my in-studio guests. That was Masego Motsogi, the Managing Director at MNC Saatchi Abel, and Mungezi Mtati, Senior Brand Strategist at Roger Wilco Digital Marketing Agency. We look forward to your engagements as our dedicated viewers and many more insightful guests that will be joining us in the future. To you at home, don't forget to join in on the conversation, share your thoughts and opinions on social media using the hashtag #MarketingMediaMoney. From me, Kiamo Mosipele, and the rest of the CNBC Africa team, it's goodbye for now.